Welcome to this Brace Yourself podcast. I have had now a 9-year relationship with our guest. 9 years. And I want to give a little bit of a story before I introduce Hud. So when I was my two older boys were at my alma mater, St. Joe, in 2016, and St. Joe had asked me to participate on their board, and my first board meeting was middle of November, so the last game of the year at home. So I flew up from Dallas and I went to Indiana. 2 boys are there. The coach asked me to talk to the team after the practice. So before practice, I was at my first board meeting and I had to sign the NDA, and I looked at the school, the conditions, was really taken aback by it. And went into this meeting where I had to address this football team and was excited to do it. But the whole time I'm talking to these guys, I was thinking, how are we going to make it, meeting as a school? And so we had a workout team board did. So I talked to the kids. They played, actually won. So we go through Christmas break, and we have a board hired workout firm to help get the school. What's the best plan to get it back on track? And unbeknownst to, I had a day before the announcement. We get through the holidays, and they decide, the board decides that they're going to shut it down, suspend operations, and they did it a week after the national letter of intent signing date. So a couple of things with that. Number one, it not only did it hobble my kids, it hobbled every kid that was male or female that was in sports, which at the time was 80% of the student body, was totally hobbled by that event. Not to mention, I didn't really get to process how I felt about it. I was concerned about my kids and the kids that came up from Dallas with their dear friends of ours that were there. So the process starts. So the national letter of intent signing date had happened. So schools had already picked up their recruits and re-signed their athletes. And I have 2. I have a junior and I have a freshman. And they put themselves out there as best they could. The coaches at St. Joe did what they could, but they had to find jobs. And so some of the schools wanted a freshman starter who was a nickel or whatever position, linebacker. And then some wanted a worn out defensive lineman who was going to be a senior, but not many wanted both. And my middle son, Gabe, had been contacted by even bigger schools to go play. And we talked about that. And Gabe just said he wanted to play with his brother. So the field got kind of narrow, and they went and looked at a couple different schools, but we got a phone call. I forget his name.
Nick Sheehan.
Yeah, from Springfield, Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
And he called.
Genetic engineer by trade.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So Nick calls me, and he's spouting off in a good way, talking about the kids and talking about University of Arkansas Monticello, and some of the schools that were interested in the boys. One was like in North Dakota. I'm like, oh my gosh, Indiana's bad, but man, North Dakota's tough. So I'll fast forward. We end up coming over to. They had talked to you, Hud, and we came to the spring game, and that was 17, and they were excited about it. So this is how this relationship started. Hud Jackson is the head coach at the University of Arkansas Monticello, the Bull Eagles. And you have been the head coach for
15 years.
15 years.
16th season become, I guess, yeah.
This will be 16.
Wow.
Yeah. So I can remember walking out after their spring game and meeting Hud and his wife, Patricia, and my wife, Nikki, was with us, and Leanne, you were with us, our executive producer. And Hud actually offered him a scholarship, right? I'm going to get you one day. So this is how this began. But today is a day that is very special for those of us in this room. If you're going to go by numbers, there's some firsts and there's the number 3. So 1 and 3. The first is, I heard this, I don't know if it's true, but was this your first attended graduation of a player?
Well, yeah, I attended for my son.
Okay, that doesn't count.
Right. Okay, right. Yeah, but yeah.
So if there's anything you get out of us today, it's you'll notice that this is a brother from another mother. He attends Liam's graduation, and Liam was a challenge, to say the least. And his freshman year, we'll get into that in a second. So it's a day of first. So HUD's first graduation attendance of a player was the day of my son Liam. There's also another first. I don't know if you caught this yesterday, but we've got a new Pope. Pope Leo. First American Pope from Chicago. I started triangulating things. He's a Bears fan, and I'm starting to connect it. I think God is returning to Chicago. Just saying. Just putting it out there.
He's a White Sox fan, too.
And he's a Sox fan.
That's right.
Well, we need a lot of help. That's right. And bowl.
Yeah.
But today was, it's also a first for Nikki and I, where all 3 of our sons played for this guy. So at UAM, so Jude, Gabe, and Liam played for HUD, and all 3 graduated. The trifecta, the 3, the hat trick was here. And this all started by what was, I can tell you, it was various degrees of tragic. We'll throw the word out there, but when that thing happened with the school, the alma mater, St. Joe, it was a mad scramble, and it turned out to be one of the best things to happen to my sons, and for Nikki and I both.
Well, I'm grateful too, because a lot has come out of that. First, I appreciate you having me on your podcast. I think it's really neat. Watched them, and the fact that Liam is the executive producer is awesome. But that whole process, what you just shared, because I know the deep feelings that you had with St. Joe and everything that went into that, and your involvement and those decisions that were hurtful to you. I mean, because of your history there. But I won't forget that. I'll never, that spring game. I remember Liam he was a big younger guy, but I just remember meeting you guys. Yeah. After that game, and it was like I don't know what it was, like instantly that guy's going to be really interesting to talk to, and end up becoming great friends. And look, how I grew up, you don't have very many of them. I mean, I grew up a coach's kid, so I do have friends in different places in the state of Louisiana and Arkansas, but I do consider you a really good friend. And there's just a lot of, before we started this today, just hearing you talk about different things that are occurring. But man, we're very happy to have the Brace family in our family.
Yeah.
Ian, I mean, he's friends with my son-in-law, Ian. They play together here at UAM and in this wedding. And, that's things that you forget about a lot of things, but those moments you'll never forget. So,
well, I'd like to expand on that for a second, because, and he probably isn't planning on me talking about this, but Liam had a very, very challenging first year. I think a lot of kids his grade, but he was no exception. He was not prepared when he went to college, and had a good first year as a freshman.
Mm-hmm.
Got to see some playing time, and his roommate left after about 6-8 weeks. He boogied, and that's his lifelong best friend. These kids were also juniors in high school during COVID, and they got here, and Liam laid an egg his first semester academically, and then laid another egg in this summer. And I got to tell the audience, if this guy didn't call me, I was going to kill him. And he actually, the message, we're going to, when we get to the end of this, I'll try to summarize, but there's so many good things to catch here because he believed in him. HUD believed in Liam, where we just went through the graduation ceremony about 2 hours ago. And the chancellor was right. It takes a lot of people, not just family, like your immediate family, but it takes coaches, it takes teachers, it takes friends like Ian, letting him sleep on his couch. And I'll tell you how it was so up and down. Nikki and I were both like, I mean, we prayed hard that he find a path, and we know his personality. And he decided he quit for the second time. And it was right before fall camp, his sophomore year. And I was brewing beer on a Sunday. And well, you got to figure Christ turned water to wine. So I was like, there's no, it's not bad. But so he had made a decision to run over 5 hours to Monticello, pick up his stuff, I think, and see some of his friends like Ian. And I said, so he calls me and he says, did you see the coaches? No. And I'm like, yeah, I don't blame him, and I'm not trying to twist the knife, so to speak, but hey, Dad, do you mind if I stay another night? And I'm like, why would he want to stay another night? He can't stand. According to 3 or 4 days ago, he wants out. He wants nothing to do with this. And he had to tell the coaches he's not coming back, but he shows up to see the culmination of fall camp. And then he calls and says, hey, I want to stay one more night. And I'm like, okay, is everything okay? Yeah, no, it's fine. So then he calls the next day and he says, I'm going to stay one more night. So now 2 nights. And I didn't think anything of it. I just told him to be careful when he comes home. And I'm brewing beer, and he calls me, and he's sort of very excited, almost out of breath. Dad, I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna come back, and I'm gonna stay. I'm gonna stay at UM. I'm gonna play football. And then all of a sudden, as he's rattling through this, I'm thinking to myself, another ride on the elevator, right, or the roller coaster. And as he's explaining this to me, HUD calls me, and I'm like, oh, here we go. Meaning in a good way. Like, we don't even say hello. He's like, I had nothing to do with it. This is HUD saying this because I had nothing to do with it. I believe you. And he goes, look, we got to get him. If he's serious about it, he's going to have to, number one, earn his way back onto the team. And he took care of that. Academically, he didn't take classes that summer, and we had to work with the NCAA on some stuff. And my part in comment to you was, he's all yours, because as a parent, we were extremely frustrated with the roller coaster of things, and Coach Jackson took him back, and he had to earn his way back, which I really appreciated HUD's approach, because I don't think today, I don't see it in the workforce anyway, that kids understand that you can't run from all the things that are uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
You got to hit the brakes, and you got to work it out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It gets uncomfortable. Good decisions can be uncomfortable. Bad ones are really uncomfortable, but you can't run from the consequences of a bad decision, and you got to earn it back.
Yep.
I mean, you deal with this is your life. You've been doing this your whole career.
Yep. It's pretty amazing on that part of it. I think I don't know where you're going with it here, that in our society, I believe it's become instant. They want that instant success.
Right.
Don't want to deal with the failures.
Yeah.
Don't want it. Let's go somewhere else with that. Yeah. And Matt, this goes back all the way to when I took this job. That people telling me, man, you don't want to do that.
What's the graduation rate for football players when you start?
18%, somewhere around there.
I thought it was.
Yeah, it was low. It was low, and there was other things here as well, but and nothing against anybody that was here before, because everybody has those things. But we knew there was going to be a lot of hard work, and there was going to be a lot of failures, which have been a lot. Mm-hmm. And what I said to you earlier about your purpose, there's a greater purpose here, And that's why it's tough. I'm convinced of that. And there's going to be a way, because we're starting to experience some of that now. But in regards to, with Liam and others that we've dealt with, and, it's, are you going to accept the adversity that's going to come your way and overcome it and be better for it? The old adversity builds character deal. Yeah. Or are you just going to turn away from it, go start anew and forget about that? And then you'll never be able to go back to that experience later in life when you get it in a tough situation. Right. Because again, it's not about your age, it's about the experiences you have. And can you go back to them and what did I learn there? Because I'm in the same one now. Yeah. And I think that's important. And with him and with others, you either want to jump all in, let's get through this, or it's just not going to work. Because look, I've made some awful decisions as a head coach here, and have to look back and go, okay, how can I do something differently here? Right. Be better as a person, as a coach, as a relationship builder, and I think that was key for us. And there's other stories of other student athletes that we've gone through with this process, but to be able to go through it and overcome it and be resilient and take those experiences. This guy graduated today, man, and that's there's nothing better than that. And to me, to see somebody be able to do that in the situations that Liam has been in, and look, physically, poor feet. I mean, this guy could barely walk and fight through it. Gabe, blown ACL in the game, goes back to practice the next day and blows it again. He's like, Coach, I'm done now. I mean, it's officially done, And in June, we put him in a coaching role, and Liam ended up helping us in that regard. But it's like they took all that, built from it, knew there was going to be an outcome that was going to make them all better in their decision making. But it's amazing to me that when you have stories like this, because that's my experience. Now I get to share that, So
yeah, I want to expand on it for a second, because graduation rate right now, 15 years later, what is the graduation rate for football?
We're about 85%.
85. So
yeah,
1885.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me, it's a loaded question because we've already talked about this.
Mm.
In a lot of cases, I'll be somewhat generic, but according to statistics, you get a fair amount of kids that have not had a father figure.
Mm-hmm.
Their first father figure is their high school head coach.
Mm-hmm.
Second is you.
Mm-hmm.
How hard or how challenging is that? I mean, you are a dad,
mm-hmm.
a granddad. How hard is that? Has it gotten any better? Has it gotten any worse? Meaning, with your experience, every year that X% of our players have not been raised with a dad in the house.
Mm-hmm.
They've had tremendous women in their lives. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to take away from that.
Right.
The role of a dad, the role of a father, and now the role of a coach, you've inherited basically two roles.
Mm-hmm.
So if you would expand on that, like how hard is that?
It's not hard for me because I grew up a coach's kid and watched my father do just that. Now, my mom was a stern woman. And so I watched how he did things and felt like was going to be a way for me to approach, my life when I was in a situation to be, a husband and a father and a coach. Originally I wasn't doing this coaching thing. I was going to law school and already had that planned out, took else out. Yeah. And we talked about that. But I just saw what he did and what he got from it, the relationships part of it.
Yeah.
So for me, it wasn't that hard of a transition. And look, everybody's story is different.
Yeah.
You could have two parents in the home and it not be productive at all just because of whatever that dynamic is.
Good point.
Because everybody, has different issues of what they may be. But we know that in the role that I am in, and my wife Patricia's involved in that as well. But in that role, everything's different. The backgrounds and how you approach that's got to be different. And again, I failed multiple times, and maybe conversations that I've had with players of mine that maybe, man, I wish I'd have done that a little bit differently. And the next time I will, And so, it's a very, very gratifying, place to be, especially if you feel like you're giving advice that helps them to overcome something,
right.
Because it's easy to quit, right? It's easy to, when you're not the starting quarterback or the starting right guard, to just walk away and go try to find something else. We talked earlier about are you going to work while you wait? I played for baseball, played football and baseball in college. Man, so happy I was able to do that. But I played baseball for a man named Tony Robichaux. Coach Robe is no longer with us, passed away at a very young age. But he would always say that, are you going to work while you wait? Are you going to work while you wait? And if you're able to do that, he was a hard-nosed guy. He didn't believe in Gatorade at the dugout. You're going to drink it out of the hose and that type of guy. And he created a mentality that was of a tough guy. And I took a lot from him. But I always remembered when he would say that, are you going to work while you wait? And so, different, getting back to kids, using your experiences of adversity to be able to relate that to them, because it's a lost art. I really believe that,
Right.
and I think in what I do in my profession, which I love, and I've got unbelievable guys that have worked with me over the years that I've been here that have gone on to be very successful, and everybody's path is differently.
Right.
Somebody who's going to use places for stepping stone, and that's great. But that's where it sort of turns a lot, and people are not putting roots down in the coaching part of it to go through all that, to go through all those ups and downs. Sometimes you'll leave a job, go to another one. It's great because you were great at the next job. You go to the next job and you're great there, but you've never really had any failures to learn from.
Yeah.
So that when you're in a situation to be a head coach, I've got guys on my staff now that have been with me for a while.
Yeah.
And that is a really, really beautiful thing when that occurs. And
the guys.
yeah. And so, that getting back to that part about this, how we deal with young people, it's a blessing to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And try to give them information that helps them to overcome and be great, And so it's people do it different, man. I've been here a long time. We've had a winning season 1 year, man. And people are probably thinking, what is it that's, how are they keeping you around? And for me, I work hard. I try to do it the right way.
Yeah.
Try to treat people well.
Yeah.
Try to get us where we need to be here at UAM so that we can be successful. But, the expectations are rising now because we're getting a lot of new things here. And I think that's great because we're all working hard to make that happen.
Yeah.
But, I always believe this, that, and again, going back to the deal that your purpose is greater. If the situation is tough, God is just telling you your purpose is greater. Just hang in there, right? And I believe that because, when we do have that success, those wins, it's going to be that much more. It's just going to be better because I think we've done it the right way. And so treating people right with our players is a big part of it, Matt.
So I would have, if anyone that knows me would have asked me, what is it all about when you talk about the game of football or any game? But from my experience, what about football? It's all about winning. It's all about winning. And it didn't occur to me until about the year he blew his ACL his junior year and came back his senior year. And man, this is awesome. Actually, I got a picture of it, but I'll talk about Gabe for a second. So Gabe, he was like Humpty Dumpty. Every Sunday, we'd have to put him back together.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say, I think he's in the wrong spot. And you're like, no, I got to have him there. It's like, he's just too small. But anyway, he was hell on wheels. So he blows out his ACL, his second ACL. And he blew one out in high school, and then he blew his other one out his junior year. Comes back. It was game 7, I think, of his 7 or 8 of his junior year. Comes back. Actually, when I asked Gabe, I said, you don't have to go do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not conscripting. I didn't conscript any of my kids to play football. That was their choice. And he's like, when did this become about you? And I was like, oh, good point. Okay. He's ready to go. Comes back, and so the last game was November 16th, 2019. Would have been his last game. And the 4 games leading up to that, his quad was detaching from his main tendon.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Nat
Grove,
Nat was telling him, hey, we're going to give you a treatment. And of course, and then it would start limiting his playing time. So by the time he got to the last game, I think he do like 30 plays. He had 14 tackles. He had a good game. But when that game was over, I exhaled. I mean, literally, I felt like I held my breath his whole career. He was like, yeah, humpty. But it was so emotional for him, for me, and you. And we were at SAU, and the whistle blew, game's over. I'm exhaled. I was just so proud of him that he went through it his way, and it was hard. And I'm in tears. He walks up, he's in tears. And it was just a great moment to my recollection. The next day when I was home, I wrote you a letter. And I wrote you a letter thanking him because I always thought it was about wins and losses. And so for those that are listening, when you take into consideration it's about wins and the pressure that Hud's under, not just to coach football, he's also the athletic director. You're getting wins, expectations are going higher and higher, but then you look at it and go, hey, you inherit, and I'm not dogging the guys before you, but 18% graduation rate to 85. Okay. What you are doing, what HUD is doing is developing young men so that then when they do get out of here with the diploma, and a lot of times the first person in their family to have a diploma and have gone through the adversity, now they're as prepared as they can be to go out and be productive. Right. And I'm not just talking work, but family, husbands, employees, sons, etc. And that's when it kind of hit me. I was like, yeah, okay, I want to win. I want everyone to win, and we all signed back up for it. As soon as the season's over, we're like, all right, what are we doing this year? Right. What do we need to get? What kind of players we need to get? Kind of all this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, it really matters is what you're doing. And I'm just impressed by the fact that you've been able to maintain that focus because it's your purpose. Because in most situations, yeah, you got people that know better than you on the sidelines.
Yeah, and that happens quite often. But the funny thing about not getting just lost in my dislike of losing, because I want to win as much as anybody.
Sure.
And I really, really feel it's not just something I'm, going to be positive all the time. I was put here for a reason. There's a purpose. I keep saying that. There's a purpose that I was put here for. And I try to find answers each day of what that may be. But the mental toughness of going through failure, is part of that, and I use, lost my dad, my mom, both my in-laws, both my in-laws and my mother all had Parkinson's. Lost my dad, a few years back, and this is going to get somewhere, just the mental toughness about this job and where you have to be. Cause man, we're moving to this spot. Yeah. I can tell you that, but I'll never forget dealing with that part of it with my dad and being in the situations that I've been in here. When dad was diagnosed with cancer, I was really involved in that. I had a great staff at that point. I was driving down to Baton Rouge to be with him to go to treatment, and never really dealt with the grief part of it. We lost dad. I was holding dad in my arms when he passed with my kids there and their spouses, there. And it was a beautiful moment. It is more than might sound. It was just a beautiful moment that I never grieved past that point. I had to be the tough guy, and it was what I was getting from this job that was allowing me to keep going.
Yeah,
keep going. It's going to be just fine. And I'll tell you this, man. We got 2 dogs. We had 2 dogs, Axel and Trip, and we lost Axel on Christmas morning. And man, when it happened, man, all that I had held on to over those years, and my dad and my mom came out. And for 2 hours, my family was what's going on? And boy, after I sat back in on my deck at the house and said, I've got to learn to deal with this a little bit better.
Yeah.
I've got to start taking every low point and deal with it. Don't hold on to it like there's going to be a huge low point that you're going to take all those little low points and you better handle that big low point.
Yeah.
That ain't how it works.
Yeah.
You got to deal with each as they come. And I've made it a point for me in this situation with young people that have gone through tough times, to be better in that moment.
Yeah.
Right. And try to figure it out in that moment. And so, man, look, it's at a place that I told you why, why is this happening to me? What did I do in my life? I know I wasn't the greatest guy growing up but man, I am as devout Catholic because my wife makes me be that way. Throws holy water when I'm sleeping at night. So I be blessed in the middle of the night. But I feel like I've gotten better, and there are things that are happening that are good, that are allowing us to get to a point that we can be successful in my job, but more importantly, man, as a husband, as a dad, as a friend, and those things add up. But man, it's interesting, this life that we live, Matt, that where we've been and how we can deal with it going forward. It's starting to work for me a little bit.
So I have a similar story on the grief, and this was, so I've got responsibility for the steel mill, 650 kids or 650 guys, and we have a fatality, 19-year-old boy, guy, and so I go down there. It was terrible. They're all terrible. Just this one is really, really bad. And so only child dies on his didn't die instantly, but he got burned really bad. And I was living in Dallas, and the mill was in Seguin, Texas. So I, haul ass down to Seguin, about 5 hours, and so shut the melt shop down, and then the young man went to the burn unit, BAMC, which is the world's leader in burn victims and amputees. So all the military, they fly them all in. So we get him to come in, and he lives for 3 days, and he passes away. One part of that is like the guy that's running the plant, who's a dear friend of mine, with SAU, a mule rider, and you get to see in those situations of this experience the best in people and the worst in people, and I saw the best in the guy. And as I got to get back, he had passed on a Wednesday, and I had to get back to Dallas because I have to take my oldest son to his first year, drop him off at college, first child, right, at my alma mater. So I pull out Seguin, and I'm starting to head north, and my phone rings, and it's one of the founders, Clyde Seeley. Clyde was an enigma. Clyde was this little guy, but he and his brother started the company back in 1947. And Clyde was a man of no nonsense, but he knew his stuff, knew his detail. And when Clyde calls you, it's normally like you didn't dot an I or cross a T. And so Clyde had been retired for 5 years, or heck, maybe longer than that. And I'm worn out. So I'm down there Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and I don't think I slept a whole lot at all. Not poor me, but just because it runs around the clock. So you have to be, you've got a first shift, a second shift, a third shift, and everybody's asking, how was he doing? How was he doing? Then I got to go back. I find out he died as I'm halfway between the mill and the hospital, and I'm with the mule rider. We pulled off the side of the road on I-10, and we sat there and we looked at each other, and all right, so we got to call this guy, let's go back. We got to address everybody. Let's get in front of this. Let's make sure we got a chaplain from the military to come help us with the guys. And the board is meeting, and I was in the board meeting earlier, and going back and forth and all this stuff. And Mule Rider and I are just gassed, right? And I got to go back because I got to drop my son off for his freshman year at St. Joe. So I'm pulling out, my phone rings, I look down and it's Clyde. I'm like, oh, crap. Clyde's going to get up my, backside. And I'm debating whether I should take the call or not. So I'm like, oh, what the hell, why not? So I take it and I answer the phone. I'm like, Clyde, how's it going? Hey, Matt, I've heard about this. Again, he's been retired for 5 years. And he says, I said, Clyde, we've got this going. We've got this going. And everybody's doing what they're trained to do, what he trained us to do. And he's like, no, that's not why I'm calling. And he kind of stopped me. I kept going because I was just rattling off all of the procedures of following. He says, I'm not calling. I know that. He goes, I'm calling because I want to know how you're doing. I'm fine. I'm better than that family. I'm better than, I'm better than the poor guys that are at the, poor guy operating the crane, right? That wasn't good.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, it's going to take you a while because I'm telling you, it's that grief is going to hit you. And I was like, well, I really appreciate the call. And I get home. Next day I get up and we pack up 2 cars, I think. And I don't get 2 miles down the road. And apparently I was acting like a jackass because my wife said, pull over. We're not driving 14 hours with you being this way, meaning you're all bent out of shape. And I kind of like got a little sporty about something that someone forgot, I'm sure. Right? And I'm like, oh man. So anyway, I'm like, all right, I kind of collected myself. We make the drive. Everything's fine. We go to drop him off. Oh. And you would have thought it was bad.
Bad deal, yeah.
I sat there and sobbed for hours. And it was I didn't want to freak Jude out.
Mm-hmm.
But even my mother-in-law who was there and Nikki, my wife, are like, are you okay? And I'm like, and I think it just, it just piles up. And that was in a short period of time. Because I was just like, I just got to go here and do this. My job's doing this. I got to take care of them. And again, there was a lot of good that came out of it. Unfortunately, I hate to say it like that because not for that family, but you do get to see the good in people, and not an experience I would want anyone to have. Unfortunately, it's part of the business, but really, I got to see a guy that been retired for 5 years reach out because he knew.
Right. Been there.
My mule rider, who's a footballer as well. He's like, we know what we need to do. So let's get it done. And it's ugly. Right. And there's no, hey, I got to go back to Dallas and I'm just going to disappear because I'm the guy in charge. You just handle it. Cause they, it's like, no, you gotta embrace it and you gotta go.
Yep.
And, again, I'm not saying there was a big win coming out of that, but I did get to see some pretty, I say that with Clive and with Stephen, we were just, it was good.
Yeah. The amazing part about being in coaching, you're in situations with young people that I've had a player commit suicide that played for me. We lost a player here that experience, Matt, this young man with a peanut allergy, and he had an issue once before and then it happened again. So you thought everything was going to be fine. And, 11 o'clock at night, I'm getting a call from a player and we're at the hospital here in Monticello and, he dongs and they're working on him, they're just telling me to sit outside and I'm not just telling the story to say the story, go somewhere, but I'm sitting outside just waiting to get in there to see him, and the nurse walks out and she doesn't make contact with me. And then the doctor comes out and he picks me up on my shoulder. He said, Hud, we lost it. And in that moment, I'm thinking, his mom.
Yeah.
And what am I going to do? And I'm calling Patricia and saying, Patricia, what am I going to do? They won't let me in to see him. It's against the rules. I can't. Yeah. I'm calling my brother, Jay, who's a priest. Yeah. And I'm saying, Jay, give me something. I'm praying through a door for this kid and had to wait for his mom to drive from Dallas to meet me with his aunt, who we'd met 2 weeks earlier in Little Rock when he had an episode before at the hospital. And I'll never forget his mother, who was the strongest woman I've ever met. And we're with Edong in the room, and we're praying over him, and she's holding me. And I'm thinking, how does this work? How is this right? And in that moment, I learned a toughness, yes, of being there for others, even in your toughest moment.
Yeah,
being there for others.
Yeah.
And that was an issue that I'll never forget. And it wasn't long ago. We're in Florida on vacation, and we're on the beach. And I just happened to walk up to the shoreline just to watch a lot of people swimming, and I see this older gentleman swimming parallel with the beach, with me, and he's on top of a wave, and I'm watching him, and you can tell he's looking down, and for some reason I just kept watching it. Well, then he stops, and I'm thinking something's not right. Something's not right. He's just floating on top of the water, and I go in, and the current's, it's pulling me out. I can't gain my feet, and I flip him over, and I knew when I flipped the gentleman over, he had died. He had died, and I couldn't get him in the water. I couldn't get him in. I'm trying to get people's attention. Nobody's listening to me. And Ian's brother, Ian's brother was an athlete in college, as Ian was, and big men. And I feel Ian come over the top of me because he knows, and we're trying to get this man in. And I remember pulling him onto the beach, and I was done. I was fatigued. Then I hear his family come, and we're on the beach, and there's a nurse that sees it happening, and she runs. And I'm sort of backing away from the situation, and I'm watching this family come around their dad, their grandfather, their brother, and they're crying, and they're grabbing me saying, do something. And I'm thinking, the best people are trying to help him right there at this point. And I keep falling back. And I keep watching, and I keep thinking to myself, the impact that this man had on these people for them to act the way they're acting. Right.
Yeah.
And I say this to you because, in those moments that trigger emotion, which I'm going to show you, this job has done that several times. It makes you think back of what's important.
Yeah.
Of doing things the right way.
Yeah.
Treating Liam and others during my career the right way, being transparent.
Yeah.
Making them understand that life ain't going to be easy all the time. Right. And how you deal with it is what's going to define you.
Yep.
The act is not what you did wrong, what you decided to do. It's how you deal with that now. And I think those two situations for me made me realize, wow, I want to have an impact that is genuine and sincere on people, so that when I do hopefully get a chance to go to heaven, that those things are looked at on how we treated people.
I do too, because I think the difference is what you're saying is that, to know better and to not do better is where you're held accountable.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
But if I'm hopeful as well. I've got a lot of things to atone for, don't get me wrong. And I think to your point, that's kind of why we're doing the podcast. If there's anything we can impart on people, and maybe I get sometimes like, oh, younger people, it's not exclusive to younger people, but man, in my experience, and I know I'm not speaking for you because you're doing it, it's like nothing worthwhile comes easy.
Mm-hmm.
And that isn't just athletics or business. It's like your family, your relationships, these things we lose sight of priority.
All right.
What's number one, what's number two, in the moment. But I think, we're here for a very short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
The richness that we get out of life, in my experience, is with the relationships, man.
Right.
When I, part of my brief intro about career-wise, again, being one of 8 kids, I have wonderful parents. We grew up with enough, not extra, but we always had we had a great house. We were, put through schools and always something to eat and more for friends that would always buy. There were people in my mom and dad's house that I didn't know that would show up. Just don't take the the frosted flakes, right? But it was one of those things where, pretty fortunate to have that. And, I think throughout it all, you learn, like, I had goals that I achieved, by the time I was 40. I thought, when I get to this point, my life is going to be a lot easier. And I think it's a common misnomer or mistake people make. I think that if I have more, that I'm going to be happier. And that's not a one-to-one correlation. Not to suggest making money doesn't make it easier at times. And, I've read all this stuff but I can tell you from my experience that the richness that you get from what you do, what you're passionate about, it's where it's at, man.
Yep.
I mean, it's not all about money. I mean, when I look at what with not taking compliments, tough for me, for sure. Not that I get a lot of them, but we did with Jude. Comes here from St. Joe and his shoulder's destroyed. So he has to have a reconstructive surgery in his shoulder. Hud puts him in as a GA, and he wanted to be a part of the team, and he stayed on another 18 months and then graduated.
Mm-hmm.
That was out of the kindness of this guy's heart. Gabe, we already touched on Gabe, and for sure we touched on Liam, that you didn't have to do anything. And he did. And I don't think, based on other guys that have kids currently in football, those coaches aren't doing that. They're not doing that at all. It's like we're visiting with Blake Jefferson.
Yeah.
At the highest
level about him. Yeah.
And you're injured, you're out. There's no consideration. And some that are listening, they say, "Oh, it's just business." It's like, yeah, it is business. And you get to choose how you operate your business, because you as an individual, I'm not saying you lay down and let people walk over because they've got a bag of excuses, but that's as cutthroat as it gets. And I don't see it being a whole lot different just by what I read and hear when you talk about NIL and the transfer portal. There's pros and cons, I'm sure, to the transfer portal. But I think what you touched on that is most interesting to me as it relates to football is that coaches are hopping around just like players are hopping around. And we're missing that element of, as I was telling you about, my coach at St. Joe, Coach Ryan Rock. To this day, I still have an affinity for him, for all the coaches that were there. They were there all 4 years. And they cared. They really tried. And we had no idea at 18, at 21 years old, how much money they made or didn't make, or their condition, their situation, that young families. They were young guys. We thought they were old, but they weren't that much older than us. They might be 8 years older than us, but they carried the torch like yourself in trying to instill the values, not just to your players, but your coaches.
Well, yeah,
it's a huge role. And I get why, in big programs and even not so big programs, head coaches should get paid. I believe that, assuming they do the things, it can't be just about winning.
Right.
I don't think it's sustainable unless you have more to the program. And I think you have that. I'm telling you, folks, I've got a friend of mine that his son just signed with UAM for, and that's all based on, I see parents come out of high school, their first son or their only son comes out, and everyone thinks their kid's going to be a Heisman, trophy winner or a Division I athlete. And the beauty of Division II and III, not to take away from Division III, if you want to play football, there is a spot for you. It might not be Division I or II, but you can certainly give it a go at Division III.
Right.
But I think the mantle, I wouldn't call it burden, but as a coach, I don't think people give enough credit to the profession of coaching and what it can do. And you're really, in our recent experience with all three boys, you've done a phenomenal job with that. I'll always be indebted to you.
Wow.
Because really, if you think about the word propagation, sorry, there you go.
Sorry.
Propagating what my wife and I do at home, did at home, and then we're releasing them to you. And if you turn out to be a real piece of work that doesn't have the focus on development of a young man, not as a football player, but both, I'm telling folks, I really, I can't say enough good about this guy as a friend, as a human being, the school and where the program's going. I think I believe in it. You know it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the only way I can operate. It just, that belief has got to be strong and positive. Was it Malik that you had on? And I think I texted you and said, new favorite NFL player. Because some of the things he was saying, he talked about, how it's cutthroat to business, and he talked about his mom and dad and how important that was. And he had that growing up. A lot of young people don't have that. So we do assume some of those roles,
right?
And try to be the best that we can be, and the advice that we give to them, and how we do that. And I've said this earlier, like, I'll cringe at some of the things that I may have said to a kid and going, man, that was just dumb. What am I thinking here? Because you said, it's a business, that's just life, but the reality of it is this: the older you get, and you start going back and looking at things that happened to you as a young man,
right,
the business aspect goes away.
Yeah.
You start asking yourself, how were you treated during that time when it was a business? Hey man, we're doing it. It's a business. I got to let you go, because this is just part of how it works.
Yeah.
But how did you do that? How did you tell them what you had to tell them? So exactly. And I look at a lot of these older NFL guys that when they get old, they become very mad about maybe how they were treated towards the end of their career or at the beginning of their career. And that's what drove them. But they're really, in some cases, bitter about that. And so for me, that's sort of, and look, again, I'm not even close to doing things the right way, but it is concerning enough to me that I want to make sure that I approach it in a way that when we leave out of those meetings, it can be productive.
Yeah.
Now, Steve White, my defensive coordinator, might not agree with it because he takes so much from me. But again, the staff I have is unreal, and Steve is a great and smart guy. But it is important on how you say it and how you approach those situations, because just like Malik said, he was lucky. He had a great family background that he could feed off of. And so every situation is different, because I'm a big second chance guy.
Yep.
And in most cases, a third chance guy. Because we've all been there, right? And I revert back to my dad's story, because my dad came from just him and his mom, Texarkana, Texas, a lot of great stories. And I'll tell you this, Liam, and you, that you have important people in your life, man, get with your dad and record just conversations. I got 6 hours of conversations with my dad that I go back to all the time, just because I want to hear his voice. I wish I'd have done it with my mom. Toward the end with Parkinson's, it's just taken so much. Her brain's there, but she just can't. But I wish I would have done that, because it allows me to find something in there, right? Because I did have a life. I had a great life. I mean, and those ups and downs, but they may have kept it away from me, but I grew up where I had a chance to be successful. And that's important. It goes back to the very first, what got us to all this conversation was guys don't have that sometimes. And we've got to be that, and we've got to be it the right way. It's not just this is what you do all the time. It's different for each person that you're dealing with, whether it's a grown up, whether it's a football player or a volleyball player or a volleyball coach or softball coach or baseball. It's all different because people's personalities are different. I just try to do the best I can. I know I fail. I fail miserably sometimes. But I do believe that if you just do it the right way, keep yourself in check in that part of it, man, when it does get good, Matt, it's going to be special. The one thing I do struggle is that, I took the job. It's on me. Yeah. I got to figure it out. I knew what I was stepping into. Yeah. The part that I wish more coaches could experience, and guys that work for me, I'm sure there's some good and some bad, but having to deal with adversity, building a program leads to something great at some point, right? Some guys getting jobs that they're great jobs when you step in them. You're on third base fixing to score, right? In all honesty, I took this job. I wasn't even in the hole yet. I was on the bench waiting to get in the hole, then on deck, then get up to bat. And one of my favorite singers, old Mac Miller, I wish he was still here, but he says something in one of his songs, 2009, as a matter of fact, you strike out, but you got to get back up swinging.
Yeah.
And then I think it's, for us, that's just a mindset that we try to do. And I get a lot of satisfaction in that regard. And I think it's important.
Well, there's a lot of parallels between coaching, between team sports and business.
Yeah.
And I think that's because what you're dealing with on a routine basis because of the age of the young men that come in here, or in your case with AD, different genders and what have you, women, sports, all that stuff. But team sport dynamic, coaching is like running the business, right? And I do believe that I found it to be, in my experience, I could be way more clinical in the way I approached someone else's business. But when it's my business and you say I'm a second chance and even a third chance guy, I'm the same way. Unless you really, and if you're listening, you know who you are. We can't find something where you can contribute or you're not willing to contribute. That's an easy one.
Right.
But I think, handling the situation, because they are different, with dignity and respect is paramount. Ironically, that guy, Clyde, the guy who was retired that called me after the fatality, that was his deal.
Right.
You will deal with people with dignity and respect. And he pushed that through the entire massive organization. Did a phenomenal job.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's get to something fun because, man, we're getting...
But this is good. I was really looking forward to this for that because, as I told you, if you hold on to that too much, when it does occur, it might not be comfortable for people. Because I know my family was very uncomfortable.
Well, I'm sure it's tough.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
at the same time, it's a process.
Yeah.
All right, so Hud is a little bit older than me, not by much. Played quarterback and he played baseball. I played, 2 sports. I drove today 5 hours, and I get out of my truck and I look like I rode a horse. Work out at least 6 days a week. I'm not saying it's, athletics or anything like that, but cardio, strength training. So you've been dating up, right?
Yeah.
Right. So what are you doing to keep yourself healthy?
I Peloton. So I do 5 days a week.
Okay.
Big believer. 20, 25 minutes.
Just get on.
Yeah. I have some of my favorite people I like following on Peloton.
Okay.
I'm an ice tub guy, man. I am in it almost every day. Now it might just be a mental thing for me, but it makes me feel better. And then you push yourself to try to get to a temperature that's ridiculous. And look, I'm in the wintertime, it's cold. I'm still doing it. But I find that it helps.
Yeah.
I do have a regimen in regards to the supplements, nutrition I take.
Okay.
Different things that, we find that have value to it that helps to get around a little bit better.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, when I get up out of this chair, it's going to take a second to do it. But it's nuts because you don't think about all that obviously when you're playing.
Yeah.
And for me, when I was in college, and I'm after my sophomore year, I'm married. I'm having a kid before my senior year. Life's different. My wife's not only raising a daughter, but she's raising her husband as well, because, I was a moron at times, but, at those times you didn't care about any of that, and so you figure that you're invincible, and the older you get, and your weight goes up and down and you're trying to figure out, what can work for you. But for me, I think I need to change it just a little bit. Eating habits are still horrible. But I'm South Louisiana guy.
You are. You're from.
I love to eat.
Yeah.
And it's my wife grew up in a family of 8. And this past weekend her brother calls, and because they're rice and crawfish farmers there in South Louisiana, and he wanted to ball crawfish for us, so we drove. I had to do it, and they were really good.
Yeah.
But it's tough, man. And I think as an athlete, again, the guy I played for baseball more so than anything because I ended up being a pitcher. I was a closer. You know, you threw bullpens leading up, or you got a quick workout, and then you were doing field stuff, you know,
Right.
but there was a regimen. And that was pretty obvious early. And then I was a big runner at one point before I tore my meniscus, which is a funny story in itself because, you know, you can play with a meniscus and you tell all your kids, you know, fight through it. And you tell your daughter who's a catcher who
Right.
played college ball, but,
Right.
hey, you know, she got to, you can suck it up. And then when it happens to you, you're like, going to apologize to all these people saying, I'm sorry. It goes, no, because it hurts really bad. And so, you know, that's the tough part. I'm 57. And which is crazy to me to think about.
Yeah.
But look, I'm grateful to be healthy, you know, but I do ache quite a bit.
I have to keep moving around.
Yeah.
All right. So if you're going to, if I was going to get your phone and look at your playlists.
Ooh. Love Nora Jones.
Georgia.
You know, Mac Miller. He's got a few songs I like. I'm a Gap Band.
Gap Band.
Like,
the bomb line.
oh yeah, I'm you know, Rick James Gap Band. Man, I've got a great playlist. I was listening to who was it? Geez, Bailey sends me stuff all the time, and I'll be like, oh, that's a great song. Etta James. Oh, listening to her the other day. I mean, and I did a little study on her too. She was a rebel. She was a little bit of a fun person. Yeah, but she's beautiful voice. And so I'm all over. I'm a little bit of country too. And I think I'm saying this right. You know, we both in the 80s, and probably a little bit of the early 90s, but in the 80s in high school, there was not a Journey, you know, Love Journey, but there was a lot of one-hit wonders.
Yeah.
You know, we didn't do it with Milli Vanilli or whatever it was, you know, they didn't even sing. It was tragic. That was tragic. But there was not like a, you know, everybody else, nobody else, you hear people talk about different, you know, bands that they followed, you know, the Beatles obviously were there in that era, but it was just not somebody you just were all into, or a genre that you just stuck to. And so
what was your first concert?
Poison.
No way.
Poison. Take that back. Robert Palmer got together with Power Station.
Oh yeah.
Remember Duran Duran's bass player maybe? Or I saw them in New Orleans, first one.
Okay.
Yeah, that was it was good. It was about 85, I think.
85.
Yeah, and because we didn't get to do that growing up a whole bunch.
No, really.
Yeah, my sisters would get mad because I got to do some things probably they didn't get to do. My parents all loosened up a little bit there when I got a little bit older.
You were with son.
Yeah, I was on the sun. I was quite.
Yes.
Yeah. But you know, it's that was my first one. I worked a Poison concert with David Lee Roth when he went solo in Lake Charles,
No kidding.
which was interesting in itself.
Yeah.
To see the backstage stuff with those concerts. But yeah, man, didn't get to a whole bunch of them, but I love it.
My first concert, real concert. I saw Cheap Trick.
Wow.
At the Toledo Mud Hens baseball stadium.
Oh wow.
This is 1987, so they were on their way kind of down. But the first, I'll call it first official concert, was U2, Joshua Tree, in the Pontiac Silverdome.
Oh wow.
Road loading with my buddies, and my dad was putting up a stink about it was during the week.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, my buddies came from Chicago, and we were living in Toledo for like 6 months. And I'm like, surely he's not going to make me go to school.
Sure enough.
Kicking me not kicking me, just nudging me. I don't put my dad in a bad spot, but right in the arches of my feet, because I was on a trundle bed that I didn't elevate.
Yeah.
You know, just kind of buried it. I mean, I'm like, it was working.
Yeah.
It's great.
You know, U2 was, Patricia and I went to Vegas this past spring break. The Sphere, where they were there before, we went to see another show, which, if you ever go, oh my goodness, it was amazing. Got to go see the Grand Canyon. We didn't do a lot of gambling, believe it or not. It was a lot to do, a lot to see there. But yeah, U2 was there, and they said it was pretty amazing.
Yeah,
how that is. But
I'll leave with this. It's on the concert talk about the music stuff, because it just consistent with when I was describing my first job out of college.
Mm-hmm.
So the owner of the foundry, his name was Sandy Gallagher. So during college, he was Mr. Gallagher. When I got out, he let me call him Sandy.
Okay.
So Sandy would smoke like 7 Churchill cigars a day. And so when he says, go up to the city, because I grew up in Kankakee, which is an hour south, go up to the city and pick this up, pick that up, and make a sales call or whatever. It's a Friday. So I'm just out of college. So this is 92. And I'm living with 2 teammates, right? And we decided at lunch on a Friday, we're going to go to Navy Pier. There's this bar over there. We're going to meet there. All right, cool. So we walk in, and I'm wearing a St. Joseph's College football t-shirt. And their WCKG, which was classic rock in Chicago, is live at this bar. So we walk in, and I hear the DJ. Well, you don't know what they look like, right? Because it's on the radio.
Right.
So it's this lady, her name is Patty Hayes, and she sounded like she smoked a carton of Marlboro. But I've never seen her. So we walk in, I'm like, oh, that's Patty Hayes. And she waves to me, and I do the old mate. And she waves me over. I'm like, my buddies are, jackass around, like, oh. So I walk up, and music's playing, and she goes, hey, my brother went to St. Joe. I said, oh yeah, is that right? And she's like, yeah, what's his name? Well, he was before me. And she says, you want to be on the radio? I said, heck yeah, I'll be on the radio. So what song do you want to hear? I said, how about some Tom Petty? So the music stops playing. She gets on the mic and she says, with me now is St. Joseph's, one of St. Joseph's finest. My brother went there, and Matt Brace is sitting next to me. And Matt, tell me your experience. I had a radio show for 2 years at WPUM, and probably heard of it. And she says, what would you like to hear? Kind of rehearsing. I said, I want to hear Tom Petty, and here it is, boom, and it goes. Well, she takes her headset off, music's playing. She goes, hey, how many friends do you have with you? I said, I've got those 2 guys with me. She gives me 3 tickets to see U2 Octoon Baby, which had just come out.
Wow.
Okay. So it's going to be at the World Music Theater. So we go, we're all celebrating, overserved, walk out, walking through the crowd, massive sold out show. And this kid that grew up in my neighborhood goes, hey, I heard you were on CKG today. I'm like, crap. So we're all having fun. I get back to the foundry on Monday. And Sandy says, Matthew? And I was like, yes, sir. And I walk in, and he goes, how was the weekend? I said, it was great. How was yours? He goes, not bad. I was just driving around on Friday afternoon and, listening to some Tom Petty. And I'm like, Petty. He goes, yeah, listen to Tom Petty. And, Patty Hayes is on there. And I'm like, oh, no. And he goes, so do you like Tom Petty? And I was like, I like Tom Petty. And he's like, and he just couldn't hold it anymore. He just dies laughing. I thought I was in so much trouble. He's going to fire me. He goes, I'm driving down the road and you're on the radio. How's it we made a sales call? The show was great.
Yeah. That's a cool story.
It was funny. It was funny.
And you telling yours, to be honest, I've only been to a few concerts, but the one that I ended up loving the most, and I can't believe I didn't mention Janet Jackson because, she's Janet Jackson.
Yeah.
So we're in Morgan City. I'm at Central Catholic High School, coach. And I can't remember if Patricia won tickets to the Janet Jackson concert in New Orleans, the Velvet Rope concert, or if she just wanted to go.
Right.
And so I was being an ass,
right,
which I'm really good at. And so she's like, and I'm like, I don't know, whatever, So I end up going, and we get there, and you sort of get into it now. You're in a Superdome, and our seats are pretty good, and I sort of heard about the concert was really good, and it was all fun. Like it's crazy. And then during the concert, they actually pull a guy that goes up on stage and sits in his chair, and Janet Jackson does her thing, right? And so it's time. And when it's time, man, I hopped up on the side of them chairs. I'm screaming. No, like I'm full rows up. You pick me. And Trish is like, oh yeah, you didn't want to. Yeah. And the guy was a military guy that she ended up picking. And I'm like, thank God. Pick me. Because that guy, when he was done, I think it just rolled the chair out. And he was like, come this way. No, it just couldn't roll me out. And it was intense. But that concert was pretty fun. It was a good time. But music, music in the 80s, man, it's for me, it wasn't there. It wasn't there.
All right, we're gonna wrap it up, folks. I can't tell you enough how much I appreciate you as a friend, what you've done for my family, what you're doing here, and I hope that anyone that's listening can glean from the conversation that there's no substitute for hard work. There's no substitute for being compassionate. There's no substitute for just getting up and not quitting and treating people right, treating people with dignity and respect, regardless of your profession. That's machining, fabricating, or running a football program or an athletic department. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
Well, I want to say something before we go, if you'll let me. I'm a lucky man. I've got a great wife. I got a great family. I got great friends.
Thank you.
And got great friends in this town that I care deeply for. But I'll say this, that I think I've learned more than anything. My dad told me this a long time ago, that never be afraid to cry.
Yeah.
Don't ever be afraid to tell somebody you're sorry. And for goodness sake, don't ever be afraid to tell somebody you love them. And those are things that I will live by my entire life, and my kids live by. And they love me, and I love them unconditionally, and they love me unconditionally, because there's a lot of conditions they could have. But I will say this before, that's important to me, that I've learned to do. I've got an unreal athletic staff. I've got an unreal football staff. I've got people that want us to be successful. I have a boss that I work for who wants athletics to be great, and she is wonderful, as y'all experienced today and some of the things she said. But I will say this, that if anybody's ever in a role, Matt, in a leadership role, and you do this, Liam's going to do this in his life. Judah Gabe going to be the same way, and your wife is an angel, as is Liz. But if you learn to delegate early in your career, give people a job, trust that they're going to do that job. And I wish I'd have done it earlier. Not that I was a micromanager, but if you give them a job and you expect it of them, they're going to do everything in their power to do it right and be really good at it.
Yeah.
And if there's anybody listens to anything I say, because there ain't much I say that's important, give people chances to be great. And if you do that, great things are going to happen. And in my life and in my career in the last couple of years, I've really had to look at myself hard there. And people are getting chances that I should have gave before, but it's going to be great in the future. And that is going to be important for me to have success in the twilight of my career. So I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you. You're a true friend. And I don't take that for granted.
I know. Likewise.
Yeah.
I love you.
Love you.
All right. It's not easy, folks. Remember, it's not easy on the easy street. Thanks for listening.
Amen.
Yeah.